all those things and so much more. Just grab a seat in the chair or the floor. Sit back, relax, recline. While she drops another casual line. You're tuned into Casually Mollie with Mollie Amburgey.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to the Casually Mollie podcast. I am your host, Mollie Amburgey, and I am so excited to tell you about our next guest. We are interviewing comedian Kristin Lytie, who actually has an album that is out. Make sure that you go listen to it. You can also get it on vinyl. It is called Disassociation Vacation, and we are going to talk to her more about that in this upcoming interview. Also, stay tuned for our upcoming shows. This is Casually Happening returns to the Golden Hoosier on Sunday, July 28th. We are going to have local headliner Max Price, who also travels all over the country. And then we will also have featuring comedians Travis Anderson and Robert Allen Hall. And of course, your girl will be kicking off the event and hosting for the evening. Again, this is Casually Happening on Sunday, July 28th. It starts at 7:30 p.m. and tickets are available on Eventbrite or by visiting thecasuallymolliepodcast.com. And again, that is the Casually Mollie with an IE podcast.com. Of course, if you want to listen to any other episodes, we are available on YouTube as well as on streaming platforms. And also, we know there's a heat wave going around the country, so just make sure you've got your ice. If you're watching me on YouTube, I've got a Stein glass that has ice water that's already melted. But my point is that stay cool, go see some comedy shows, come join us in the AC, and then listen to our podcast episode with comedian Kristin Lytie. You're going to love her. Thanks, everybody. I am your host, Mollie Amburgey, and I am so excited to introduce our next guest. She is a comedian. She has a comedy album that was just released called Dissociation Vacation, and honestly, she has just become one of my favorite people. Give it up for Kristin Lytie, everybody. The crowd goes wild. Hello.
Ooh.
How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me, Mollie. This is really cool.
Awesome. So why don't you tell everybody, because obviously I know where you're joining us from, but why don't you tell us a little bit about where you're casually at right now and where you're joining us from?
Yeah, I'm coming to you live from Green Bay, Wisconsin, comedy capital of the world. Don't be intimidated.
Oh, I love it. No, I actually we were just talking about this a little bit earlier. I love that, one of the perks about doing a podcast like this is I get to learn about places where I'm like, oh my gosh, there's comedy thriving. And I've been seeing a lot of your comedy works over at Green Bay. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the projects that you have going on? And I'd love to hear everything about them.
Yeah, a couple things I'm really excited about is the upcoming weekend, the weekend of July 18th through the 21st. We actually have two comedy festivals happening. We have the Green Bay UFO Fest, which is named after our local record store.
Oh, wow.
So we've got 3 days of Midwestern punk rock, and we're doing something new this year. I'm curating a half hour of comedy on Friday and Saturday. So that'll be at the Tarleton Theater in downtown Green Bay. And I'm really excited because my new album came out on Burn This Records out of Los Angeles, which is Brandy Posey's label. And we're going to have artists from the label come and do those shows.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
How cool is that? So how has that collaboration been like, bringing in people, different artists to Green Bay?
It's been really cool because all the crew of Burn This Records, they come out of kind of DIY punk rock backgrounds. So I feel like they get it. They understand, like, we're all going to hang out in one house and sleep on couches, floors, beds, anywhere we can, just to make art happen. So I think we all have that shared understanding and come from the same background. So we get it,
Yes.
And it's been really fun. Everyone's been really excited. The local radio has had me on a few times to talk about it.
I've seen that. Yes. How did that go?
Really well. I love being on the radio, it turns out.
Yes. Radio is actually really fun. I definitely, I could see you doing that really well.
Yeah. So that was a blast. And then the same weekend, we have our very first ever Green Bay Fringe Festival, which is actually, my shows are going to be across the street from the music festival. So we'll have shows Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, and that'll be a place where the Burn This Records comedians will get to do a little longer set. Like during the music festival, everyone's doing a 6-minute set. Short, sweet, get it in, get it out. What am I saying? No. Short, sweet is what I meant to say. And then, at the Green Bay Community Theater where the Fringe Festival shows are, everyone will get to do a little longer set. But it'll be different lineups every night. I hope everyone comes out.
As you should. Where should anybody get tickets, or is it easier to get at the door, or where should everybody go to for that?
Yeah, you're going to want to buy your tickets in advance. If you Google Green Bay Fringe Festival, you can buy individual tickets by each show. There's also a lot of other fun like plays, one-person shows, improv. There's a mind reader. So there's all kinds of acts in the Fringe Festival.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then GBUFO Fest, you can get those tickets at the record store or online if you just search GBUFO.
Perfect. And don't worry, everybody. I know sometimes when you listen, you're like, oh my gosh, or you're watching, I got to make sure I find these links. We'll make sure that we have them in the captions. That way you can click and make sure that you go. I understand because we have a St. Louis Fringe Festival here, and I love working with the St. Louis Fringe Festival. And we did a Casually Mollie comedy showcase where we went on St. Louis Public Radio and talked about the show. So radio is definitely a lot of fun. The Fringe Festival is a lot of fun. And what I love about the Fringe is that you're able, just like you talked about, to see all different types of art, like comedy, one-person shows, plays, like a mind reader. Like, where would you see that? Anywhere else, But what I love hearing about is how Green Bay, I know we said, you're like, oh, don't be intimidated, but it is definitely thriving from what it sounds like. What made you decide to be part of the Green Bay comedy scene and artistic arena?
Yeah, so I grew up here, but 2008 to 2018-ish, I lived in Chicago. And then, a lot changed in my life, and I realized I wanted to make more of a difference because in my day job, I do union organizing.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And at that point in time, I was just kind of looking around Chicago and realizing they don't need me here. Chicago has it down. They've got you probably get one organizer living on every block. So at that point in time, it made more sense to go live back home, which is an area we are, purple-ish. And, union density was quite low. So it just felt I should go home. And, it was a sacrifice because in Chicago, you've got multiple shows every week, multiple mics per night. So, I did have to weigh that in terms of, I won't have the same access to the art scene that I had in Chicago, but it does offer space to create something new and kind of find my own voice, plant a flag more. So that was appealing to me. And it also just other things changing in my life. I got sober, I got divorced, I got my hip replaced. So it kind of felt like huge.
Everything comes in threes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. That's crazy.
I kind of felt why not,
Yes. No, I think it's great what you're doing for the community. I've been following all of your stuff. And one of the things I've been following is that you have a comedy album out called Disassociation Vacation. It's even on green vinyl, which I am absolutely obsessed with. Why don't you tell us a little bit? What I always love to hear, because, some people say, oh, I have an album, I have this, but you really have been presenting it in a very professional forum, and I applaud you for that. What made you decide at this point in your comedy career that you wanted to make a comedy album? Because wasn't it number one on Amazon or iTunes? I remember when we were at Middle Ground, we were talking about that.
Yeah, I'm so happy you said that because actually I met with a few PR firms and, just for the cost that they wanted, I was like, oh, I come out of a DIY background. So I was like, no.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I had a friend who had a medical emergency. So I was like, well, I'd way rather give this money to my friend so she can be healthy, So I'm really happy to hear that it came off as professional because, that was pretty much me calling on all the talents of my friends and getting their advice and really just kind of learning as I go and doing the best I could.
No, yeah. I'm very impressed. But that, that's what DIYers, because I get that. I'm the same way. Sometimes you learn from your mistakes, right? When you first start out or you do something. But what you did great was you used everything's about networking, right? And you were like, okay, if I know this friend who's going to know to do something, I need to call on them. Or like, if I need advice on something else, I'll call on them. And that's why, you know, you got to keep your friends close because, you know, we all help each other, right? Like you were helping a friend with a medical emergency, and then you'll have people that will help you with a comedy album. And then it's just cool because you learn new life skills you probably didn't maybe have before. So like I said, I really applaud you for that. It's been a great presentation. Like I said, it's been number one. What has been the feedback other than being number one, of course, because why wouldn't you be? What has been the feedback that you've had about the album and the material that's on it?
Yeah, you know, I've always done comedy because I love it. And it's just sort of a creative release for me because the day job can be stressful. And I think, you know, the biggest validation was that I recorded this album at Altercation Comedy in Austin, Texas last year. And JT Habersat, the founder of that fest, who's been an awesome friend to me, was like, hey, you should record an album. You should do it at my fest. So it was something that I kind of wanted to do. Like it was in the back of my mind, but I would never, I don't know. I don't think I would have done it myself if a friend hadn't prodded me to. So I would say like doing that and being in that community and then seeing the validation of all the sales, it was like, maybe I am good at this.
I have definitely, and not just because Kristin's on my podcast, how I met Kristin, our origin story of friendship came from Middle Ground Comedy Festival in Indianapolis, Indiana. And I remember, I think you were on the shows that were after the shows that I was on. So I was like, I'm going to hang out and see her perform. And I just remember, I was like, she is so funny. I thought your delivery was so smooth. And I remember it's like, when you meet new friends in comedy, sometimes like you have to go up to somebody else, like you're on a date and be like, hi,
Absolutely.
like, is she normal? Like, would she talk to me? And Gwen Sunkel, who's one of the founders of Middle Ground, was like, yes, Mollie, like she's so nice and you're so nice. Like, go talk to her. Don't worry about it. So I was like, hi, Gwen told me that I could come talk to you. And you were so sweet. And then we went and had lunch and I learned all about Kristin's life story, which is why I wanted to bring you on. And I had no idea, you know, you are just so confident. I had no idea maybe that you were like, you know, I probably wouldn't have done it if a friend prodded you, but I'm so glad that they did because it is really well done. What made you decide to do it on a vinyl record too, as well, in addition to like all the streaming services and things that it can be on?
Yeah, so I grew up in the punk scene here in Green Bay, and like it was all about distros and labels and vinyl and 7 inches, and so that's always just been in the back of my mind that's what you do, and that's cool. And so when when I realized I had an album, I was like, I need it to be on vinyl. That's just sort of a bucket list item for me. And my favorite color is green. So it all worked out.
Yes, absolutely. No, I think that's great. I
have had some people be like, oh, is this you singing? And I'm like, what? No one would want that.
That'll be the next album. So there you go. Well, now
never.
I would never. I love that. So we're not going to be expecting a punk rock album anytime soon?
No. I would not force that upon my friends in a million years.
Oh, sorry. I would definitely support it. I would definitely listen to it. We'll just talk to the label, be like, listen, I know you made a comedy album, but maybe we can get some punk rock out here for Green Bay. Oh, no, Kristin, you have been a delight. I did want to ask you, you know, what was really cool. So obviously, like, you know, Kristin, like, absolutely. We were talking about like making friends and comedy and meeting people, especially women. If women in comedy are listening to this or watching this, what is maybe some advice that you would give them from your perspective coming up into comedy with your experience?
Ooh, that's a big question.
It is a big question. I know, but I know you can also handle it. It'll be great.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, you know, believe in yourself, trust in yourself, make friends with other women. Don't be the cool girl. You know, build community around you. And that way, you know, you have friends that'll support you and help you grow and keep you safe.
Absolutely. Well, see, that was a great answer. Sometimes with a big question, it's a very super simple response. So I really appreciate your honesty. As I also wanted to talk about you. We talked about your comedy album and where you're at. And also our origin story of friendship. But what was your origin story of how you started comedy? Like, why were you like, hey, this seems to be a good fit for me?
Yeah, actually, it's kind of funny because the woman who inspired me to try stand up, because we've been friends for like 20 years, we came up in the scene together. She is an author, and she was having, I think it was a book release party. I wanted to say first book, but I don't think that's right. But, you know, she had noticed that I was funny and I enjoyed comedy. And she was like, why don't you host my book release show? And so it's kind of like,
Wow.
Actually do it. Okay. Yeah. So then I practiced. I started going to open mics. And at that time, I was living in Chicago, but stationed to work. We were trying to organize a union at a craft factory in Champaign-Urbana. And they had a really fun open mic. And, you know, all my coworkers, I was pretty much alone all week. So I was like, yeah, I'll give it a shot. So I started going to that open mic, then going home to Chicago. And, you know, did Emma's book release party, Emma Alice Johnson, and then just started getting bookings like right away.
Wow.
So
how cool. Well, so I want to know more about this book release party. So was this like in a bookstore or in a certain venue? And then what was the book about?
Yeah, it was Knockbox Coffee Shop in Chicago.
Nice. Okay.
One of my favorite places that it's sadly no longer. But yeah, Emma is just an amazing author. She wrote Dungeons and Drag Queens, and she writes a lot title. Of like fantasy, adventure, sci-fi, but with like really great punk rock twists on like gender roles, and she's amazing. I love her.
So that's what I wanted to know, because first of all, I think that's very cool. I love that it was in a coffee shop. So what we were kind of talking about even before we were recording is that, you know, comedy can pop up anywhere, right? Like sometimes people like myself included would be like, oh, I had no idea. Like there was like comedy in a city, or, you know, you can do it in a venue. And the same with theater, like really any art form these days, you could probably take a creative take any room and turn it into something. So from a comedian perspective, what was it like performing at a book release party? Did people know that comedy was going to happen, or was that kind of a fun way to loosen people up to get excited for the book, or what was your angle when you went into that?
Yeah, basically that was my first show ever, and I had no idea what to expect, but I was just so excited to be there.
Yeah,
with
I didn't
all my
realize
friends.
that. Yes.
Yeah, and it was broad daylight in front of windows. You know, it was like an ambush room with people just coming and going. And you know, now given the experience I have, like I would know that would be a tough show. But in that moment, I was like, this is the best thing in the world, and I love it.
Oh, that's great, though. Well, first of all, I find that so interesting because, you know, a lot of times, and this is just the way it is in comedy. You hear like, oh, I went to an open mic and I loved it, or I like this and I love it. But I think that's so interesting that sometimes we find things that we're the most passionate about and lead us on a path. And I don't mean to sound like so deep and so philosophical, but it really is true. And it starts like somewhere in a coffee shop for like a book release party. It's just so random, but so awesome. And I really shout out to Emma for seeing, you know, your talent and wanting to be, you know, in a joint partnership with that. Women supporting women. What a great story. I appreciate you sharing that. That's awesome.
Yeah, I do think all the great things I've done in my life that I'm most proud of have come about because friends encouraged me to do it. Like the album, doing comedy in general. And actually, my next project, I've got a zine coming out called Uniontown that I'm collaborating on with Whitney Wasson. She draws the comic Sober Rabbit, so she's illustrating it for me.
Wow.
And that was Emma again, who's like, why don't you do a zine? You haven't done one in like 20 years. Do one and we'll do a show. So Saturday, July 27th, we'll be at Duck Duck Coffee in Minneapolis doing our zine show again.
Oh my gosh. Okay. For those who may not know, just because sometimes we'll have like listeners coming on to learn about comedy, why don't you kind of explain what a zine is?
Yeah, so a zine is just like a DIY magazine, and mine is going to be kind of like a reflection of working 15 years in organized labor and, what that's been like personally, and also some great ideas for building workplace democracy at your own work site.
Nice.
Mine will have, we're doing it in the style of Richard Scarry in Busy Town. So it'll be
Get
Uniontown.
Out. Yes. Yeah. I love that. Oh, that's nostalgia right there.
Yeah. So she drew me as a cute little badger, and I'm really excited about it.
How cool. And let's see, now everybody, myself included, learned that there's so much more underneath. I love it. Very, very cool. And speaking of storytelling and different shows, but sometimes I like to ask, you have a lot of experience. How long have you been doing comedy?
11 years now.
11 years. So as I was saying, you've been doing it for quite a minute now, which I think is excellent. With your experience, when did you feel that you were like, hey, now that I'm doing shows and things like that, when did you decide? Because you go on the road a lot. So when was maybe a time where you were like, all right, now I can maybe start taking my material on the road and, travel around the country?
I've always really loved travel, so comedy just felt like a great excuse to do it. Honestly, I was probably touring way before I was ready.
That can happen, though. That can happen. Yes.
Yeah, because I remember, I think I was 2 years in when I went to Austin and met JT Habersat. But, luckily it worked out. We've been friends ever since. So he saw something in my green ass that was...
But that's how it starts, right? It's just like what you talked about, things in life, your friends have encouraged you. That's great.
Yeah. Also, I think if you're in a bigger city, people automatically assume you're good. I've noticed the trade-off of that now being in Green Bay when I try to reach out to book things and I don't know the people. They're like, Green Bay? But, 1 year in and you say Chicago, they're like, oh my God, yes.
Yeah, that's there is a little bit of truth in that. I feel there's sometimes where I say, oh, I produce shows in St. Louis, and everybody's like, oh, St. Louis. But then they come to a show and they really see some very talented people that will be on a show. And I'm not even talking about just locals in our area that are just amazing. And they're like, oh, there's a lot actually to see and do here in St. Louis. So it's very similar. Yeah.
I love the Midwest. I'm going to die on that hill. And I feel like we all deserve art no matter where we live. And a part of coming home was this idea of I want to make comedy that is specific to Green Bay for us, because we deserve that.
Yes, absolutely. And I was just having this conversation because I run a show at this place called the Golden Hoosier, and somebody was like, oh, well, because we always use different venues, just like, oh, sorry, I just hit the cord here. This is what happens when you're Italian, you use your hands for everything. But you have different venues in the Fringe Festival. Here I am. I'm like, if you're watching it on YouTube, here we go. This will be on a TikTok clip. Let's do it. Or you're, different places, or, you're working with a comedy album or a label from a different state and you're in your state. But, COVID has really changed some things. And so when people are like, oh, are you going to move your show ever from the Golden Hoosier? You do it at different venues. I'm like, no, that's our home base. And I loved it because it gives people the accessibility who maybe are like, oh, I've never been to the Funny Bone, or I've never been to a Helium Comedy Club, because people do get anxious. They're like, what is comedy about? Or they see a clip on Netflix and one person got called out in the audience. They're like, well, is that going to be me? Am I just going to be somebody's crowd work? When in reality, you learn, oh, there's so much work that goes into being a comedian and a performer. So props to you for being able to go around the country and adjust to different audiences. And that's what I wanted to ask you too, being on the road and performing for, different states and, different people. How do you work do you always kind of do the same thing and you seem it works? Or do you ever have to change your delivery for different places? How do you feel changing it up in different areas of the country?
Yeah, usually I have a few little choose your own adventure pass where I'll see how folks respond to certain things. And
yes.
if they like something, then I'll lean into it. I think some of the surprising things I found is Midwesterners love dark humor. They love true crime. They love the murder.
Yeah,
they love it. So I kind of, was shocked to go out west or down south, and they're like, no, thank you. And then, when I was in the South, I thought my political stuff, they wouldn't but actually it was talking about being raised Catholic. They were all like, ooh, "Ooh, weird." I was like,
What?
Okay.
It's
Yeah,
surprising.
so I would say like I make a few tweaks, but I always feel like I am who I am on stage. So if they don't like it, it's okay.
But that's all right. You know, honestly, you know, different people like different things, and that's why comedy is so subjective. So I think it's great that you stay true to yourself, but I do like that. What did you call it? The adventure pass? What was it?
Oh yeah, choose your own adventure.
Choose your own adventure. I love that terminology. That is awesome. Casually choosing your own adventure with Kristin Lytie. That's what we should definitely have that as our episode. Before we leave today, first of all, thank you so much for coming on. Why don't you share, if you have a second, some casual stories about the road? Maybe one that was really positive, and then maybe one where you're like, oh shoot, everything just went wrong, but you just made the most of it.
Yeah. I will say one of my favorite stories, I was down in Fort Benning. Where was I? I was at Arkansas. Bentonville, Arkansas. That's where I was.
Yeah.
I was doing Steph Bright's show down there. And
Oh, I love
afterwards-
her. Yeah, she's great. Yes. Shout out to Steph.
Afterwards, there was probably about like 5 to 10 people who all worked at places like Starbucks and, service industry folks. And they really wanted to chat about like building workplace democracy, what that looks like, how you do it. And we just had this wonderful conversation. And it was a place where, that's like the home of Walmart. So I was a little worried that the crowd would be like kind of anti-union but they absolutely wanted to chat and learn and talk about it. And it was really fun. And that was probably one of the best. And then also, in terms of best, like I would say Limestone and Middle Ground, Indiana, you know how to throw a fest. It's it's a great time. I met a lot of wonderful people, including Mollie.
Hey.
And, yeah.
Thank you.
A friend described comedy festivals once as summer camp for comedians, and I totally agree.
Yes. Isn't it though? I love it. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And then, bad.
Yes. Where did things take a turn? I know we try to block the trauma, but let's see.
Yeah. I would say the most devastating is just always when you roll up and find out that your show hasn't been promoted and no one's there. And then it's like a moment of, existential dread of like, what am I doing with my life?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Isn't it crazy? It just takes over because you're like, oh my, like when it's good, you're just like, oh my God, like I'm growing, things are changing. This is awesome. And then every once in a while that feeling creeps up. It happened to me the other night. Like you're like, what am I doing with my life? But then the next day you wake up, you do have a good show. You have a good set. It does comedy. Like you try to keep it as consistent as possible, but sometimes it does have its up and down. So, but I feel like you monitor those very well, which is why you have a very successful comedy album. So yeah.
Thank you. I do. One thing I've learned as I've grown is I'll say no to certain shows because I know I value my time and I know what some shows are going to be and I know where I want to spend my time. So I think valuing yourself is also something you learn as you grow as a comic. Because if you would have talked to me like 8 years ago and said, yeah, sometimes you turn down shows, that baby comic would have been like, what? Why?
Yeah. Exactly. It's like the thought, like I remember somebody said that they were just like, oh, sometimes I have to say, I'm like, what? Say no. Oh my God. I am a yes woman. I'm going to say yes to everything. And then yes, things sometimes no is okay. So I really appreciate you actually like saying that. That's great to hear.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm saying no all day. It's great.
Yeah. Cheers to no all day. If you're in St. Louis, it's very hot right now. So Chris gave me who runs Midcoast Media. He gave me, shout out to them, a giant glass of ice water. So in a Stein glass. So what are you drinking over there?
I am drinking Nespresso coffee. It's hazelnut flavored. Very good.
Oh, my goodness.
In my Nespresso mug. I'm a corporate whore.
Sabrina Carpenter over here. I love it. Yes. Espresso. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's late capitalism. What can you do? Like, I just want to be happy a little bit of the time.
Exactly. I love it. I'll just get my Stanley cup out of I don't even have a name brand Stanley Cup, but I just have a bunch of different like thermoses. And I'm just like, the fact that I have a collection, some of these just need to leave my house. So it's all right. But I'm a coffee whore, so it's fine. Corporate whores, coffee whores. Casually, casually here for it. I love it. Well, Kristin, these stories were great. I actually love the anecdote that you gave. That's wonderful. Before we leave today, is there anything else you would like to casually share on the podcast, or do you want to repeat maybe the shows that you have coming up?
Yeah, I would say if you're anywhere in the Green Bay area next weekend, come to the Music Fest, GB UFO Fest at the Tarleton, come to the Fringe Festival to see stand-up comedy. We've got Zach Peterson, Gwen Sunkel, Dwight Simmons, Madelano Martin, Katie Bowman from Denver, Brandy Posey from LA. It's going to be amazing. So
it's gonna be
come on out,
great.
support that. And hopefully these are both two things we can continue to grow in Green Bay throughout the years.
Absolutely. Good for you, by the way. Like, that's another thing I wanted to end on, too, is that, like I said, I know you were like, hey, I moved from Chicago, things like that. But we find comedy sometimes in the craziest places. And good for you for continuing to help grow the scene in Green Bay and bringing comedy to your community. I think that's awesome. So good for you. Of course. No problem. Well, Kristin, I hope you have the best rest of your day. We always ask before the interview closes out, what are you going to casually do now that our episode is over?
I'm going to casually get in my car and drive 2 hours to Milwaukee. I perform tonight at Laughing Liberally, where I'll be selling my brand new green vinyl. Woo! And the RNC there kicks off this week there, so it's gonna be a fun show. We're gonna have a lot to talk about.
Well, anything with Kristin involved, let me tell you, keeping it professional here, but it's always so fun, and I love it. And it was so lovely, of course, to see you. Hopefully, if you ever, just let me know if you ever come through St. Louis, and we'll make it happen. We'll make it work.
Yeah, likewise for Green Bay, definitely.
Yes, of course. We'll have to. We'll just look forward to some girl power collabs in the future. Can't wait. So sounds good. Well, enjoy Milwaukee. Break a leg with all your shows. And again, I'm Mollie Amburgey, everybody, and this is Kristin Lytie. Thank you so much, and have a good rest of your day. Bye.
Bye.